Hello, Podmates. Howie Severino here with a special guest, Dr. Mohan Sawhney, an Indian-born expert on artificial intelligence applications in business and Associate Dean for Digital Innovation at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. Professor Sawhney is a globally recognized scholar, teacher, consultant, and speaker on business innovation, digital marketing, and product strategy. He is currently in Evanston, Illinois, but will be coming soon to the Philippines to give a lecture on artificial intelligence. Good morning there, Professor Sawhney. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
How do you define artificial intelligence in its simplest form?
In the simplest form, artificial intelligence is any software program that has the ability to reason and to mimic some form of human decision making. Right, so it has the ability to take input, learn, adapt, and to provide an output. So it's really kind of mimicking cognitive work and cognitive decision making. The term was created in 1958. So AI has been around a very long time. It is, and in fact, it has gone through what we call the AI winter, where everybody sort of said this is never going to, come out to anything, because the early AI systems, and in fact, even I was in engineering school in the 1980s, we had AI, but those days they were called expert systems. So expert systems, we basically were rule-based expert systems where you programmed a set of rules into a system, and then it would make recommendations based on the rules engine. The problem is that that system was only as smart as the rules that you put in, and every time you ask the same question, you get the same answer. But what changed then was the evolution was we had machine learning. And this started, in the about 20 years ago. So in machine learning, the idea was now that the algorithms could learn based on exposure to more data. So that's why it's called machine learning. The machine learns, and you can do this without explicit programming, as opposed to the earlier generation where you have to explicitly program the rules. Now the machines found patterns in the data. So that was machine learning. Then that evolved into what we call deep learning. And deep learning is about 10 years old from 2013 onwards. And deep learning was the idea that you started to actually look even more closely at mimicking cognitive decisions that humans make, because our brain is organized as a neural network. So it's a network of neurons, and that network is hierarchical. So there's sort of layers. So that neural network became the foundation for what we call deep learning. Those techniques, those algorithms, ultimately it's matrices. It's matrices, it's rows and columns. But those deep learning models are really good at pattern recognition problems of three kinds, recognizing speech, the nature of speech recognition, and recognizing text, natural language understanding, and third is machine vision, which is images. So speech data, images data, and text data were the three forms of problems. And that was what the excitement was until last year, and still is, right? If you look at, for instance, medical diagnosis of CT scans, or if you look at driverless cars, looking at pedestrians, that's all deep learning algorithms, Google Photos, and so on. What is new since last year, literally with the announcement of the API about more than a year ago, but now with the announced creation of ChatGPT, which was really, by the way, ChatGPT is not new. What is new is the interface that they put on, OpenAI put on it. What is underlying it is what we call a large language model, or LLM. ChatGPT just made it very easy to interact with. Anybody could interact with it. Earlier, they had released the API, which means programmers could interact with it, but now end users could interact with it. So what is new about this technology is it is generative AI. What does generative means? It actually traditional, if you look at deep learning, it generates a prediction, right? It makes a prediction. Is this X-ray diseased eye, or is it is a good eye? Is this an email fraud or spam, or is it not? But in generative AI, it generates new content. Right? Whether it's generating new images, generating new text, generating new code, generating new videos. So the idea of generative means that you are actually creating new, previously unseen data based on a training data set of similar data. So that's what's new and what's getting people excited. But it's important to understand that machine learning, deep learning, those haven't gone away. They're still, 90% of the applications are there, but generative AI adds a new layer of use cases and functionality that is getting a lot of people excited right now.
Is it correct to assume that AI is only learning from what is on the internet already? So if the internet has a lot of trash, how will this affect AI?
Yeah, I think that is true. Because all of AI models are subject to the garbage in, garbage out, problem. And another very important thing is that AI can only make predictions based on the past. Mm-hmm. It can never do cold start creativity, right? I like to say that no deep learning algorithm could have come up with cubism, with Picasso, but it can now take Picasso's style and apply it and create a new painting, right? Similarly, no AI algorithm would have come up with the theory of relativity, because that is just a discontinuity. It was nothing people had ever thought about before. So there are limitations. But as far as like the whole internet is concerned, well, the internet is actually very vast. So what is ChatGPT trained on? ChatGPT is trained on, on a vast body of literature, right? From classics to history to science to medicine to engineering to business, and essentially anything that has been put online digitally. And by the way, now all libraries are online, right? Google has digitized a lot of libraries. So pretty much, everything that mankind has written, even in the ancient times, is now available digitally. So I think it's unfair to say that the internet is full of trash. I think the internet is actually everything that mankind has ever written. So it actually becomes a very, rich learning foundation for these language learning models like ChatGPT or GPT-4, which is what underlies ChatGPT. So, but subject to that, it is still based on the past. It is still subject to training cutoffs, which for GPT 3.5 is September 2021. And it is subject to the biases, not only of the of what data is exposed to, but there's another bias that's important to understand, that initially you do need humans in the loop to train, because the output of the language learning models is evaluated by human coders. And there were about, I think, 40 coders who were involved in, human coders were involved in the creation of ChatGPT. So those judgments may be biased, those judgments may be limited by, by the human being. So those are the constraints. And also, once the language learning models are launched, they get trained based on how people interact with them. So those interactions are biased. That can also lead to a bias in training. So all these are caveats, because there is a very nice metaphor that people talk about. Language learning models and generative AI models there's a term for it, stochastic parrots. Mm-hmm. So they're basically probabilistic parrots. They're parrots who will repeat back to you what they have learned, and they'll do it probabilistically. But you have to understand that the parrot inherently doesn't have intelligence, doesn't have So, these models may look like they're reasoning, but they're not actually reasoning. They're just doing, prediction of words based on what words have occurred in history. But with that said, the ability that they have and the realism and the power is enormous. I mean, I have been in the area of technology and innovation and the internet for more than 30 years. And I have to say, I have never been more amazed or excited by not only the scale of scope of the possibilities, but also the speed with which this change is happening. That speed is absolutely mind-boggling.
But wouldn't you say that the speed of the development of AI is also dangerous?
It is dangerous because, the technology advances at a very rapid pace. Human ability to appreciate its pros and cons and to usefully apply it doesn't advance as quickly. Mm-hmm. Organizations and their ability to leverage technology advances even more slowly because there are more bureaucracy involved. And regulation also lags because it takes a while for regulators to wrap their heads and arms around what is going on. So yes, I think that the genie is out of the bottle and things are moving very, very rapidly, and we can't slow things down. There are people, including Elon Musk, that are calling alarms saying, shut this down, slow it down. It's not going to slow down. It just needs to be managed, better and managed more intelligently. And that's a collective responsibility of the big tech companies like Microsoft and OpenAI and Google and Amazon, but also of the governments and regulators and corporations. So we will have to approach AI in a responsible and ethical manner, in a way that is inclusive, in a way that's unbiased. I think the most powerful analogy I can offer here is that this is the new nuclear energy. We've learned how to split the atom. You can either create nuclear energy out of it, or you can blow yourself up spectacularly. It's your choice, right? So technology is just a tool, but I like to say that a fool with a tool is still a fool, perhaps a more dangerous one.
For emerging economies like the Philippines, how do we leverage AI?
Yeah, so I think that it's AI for emerging economies like the Philippines is a double-edged sword, right? And that on the one hand, it creates enormous new opportunities for the people who have the right skills and the talents, because there will be lots of new jobs created in data analytics and in engineering, in the use cases that emerge out of this, whether it's in manufacturing or healthcare and so on. But on the other hand, a lot of the what I'd call mundane cognitive work, low-level cognitive work, whether it is, so for example, if you look at the Philippines, let me take just two businesses that Philippines in services has been strong in. Let's look at call center operations because of the excellent English, and the other is nursing. I was on the board of EXL Service, and we recruited over 1,000 nurses who were trained on US RN and LPN certifications, but who operated out of the Philippines. So if you look at nurses, for instance, so many nurses who come from the Philippines are working as nannies and doing mundane jobs in the US because they don't have the certifications. But what now we can do is to actually train them to stay in the Philippines and to not have brain drain, but be with their families. So if you look at nursing and AI, nursing actually really helps AI because it becomes the co-pilot. The nurses in the Philippines, in Cebu and in Manila and other places, were actually handling calls as patients called in. They were doing the diagnosis. They were doing what should be the follow-up. So that can be informed by AI. So I've seen a very interesting demonstration that Microsoft has of the Dynamics Copilot for customer service. So where you've got a chat window that's open with a customer, and simultaneously the algorithm is saying, I think this is the problem. I think this is what you might want to tell them. So it's generating the input. So that idea of human beings and machines working together makes the nurse that much more productive, makes that call center operator that much more productive. So their job becomes more interesting. Their job becomes higher level, more strategic, but you need fewer people. So that's the double-edged sword. So I think that the challenge for these economies is to kind of upskill people and to make them, work collaboratively with AI tools. So this idea of the co-pilot or the notion of, I like to say AI should be assisted intelligence, not artificial intelligence, because you're actually doing augmenting human beings. But for the people who are not able to make that transition, it's going to threaten jobs.
Should we fear AI replacing jobs, or will it also generate new jobs in the future?
I think that the right word is that AI will displace jobs. So it will replace, but it will also create. So means that the jobs will be somewhere else. That's the idea of displacement, not replacement. So So I think displacement is a better word to think about, because that means that there are new opportunities that are created, but those are different from the opportunities that are taken away. I think that the biggest onus responsibility is on the universities and the education system to create the right skill sets and the right opportunities, because there are two problems in emerging countries. I mean, I'm from India. We have this problem big time in India too. I'm sure you have it in the Philippines, and that is that what people learn at university, first of all, is not aligned with what they need on the job, right? So we need better what we call market aligned learning, right? But the other thing is that even if it is aligned to what the market needs, it's outdated. So the two challenges for education are: how do you align the learning, or the theoretical learning that they have, more closely with the jobs? And secondly, how do you keep them updated so that you're aligning it with the jobs of the future, not jobs of the past? So that will happen if there is a closer collaboration between industry and the education industry, education institutions facilitated by the government, right? So you may even have companies sponsoring positions and picking up graduates who have been trained in order to do the jobs of tomorrow. I think it is happening between industries and individual educational institutions, but not so much between industry and the government. For example, I'm aware of some business schools in India who have created captive programs in analytics. Basically, company says, I will hire your entire class. You teach them analytics, you teach them AI, I got it. So it's a partnership. So they're actually creating almost, captive. So that's an interesting example of a partnership. But I think that government will take longer to get involved. You will need a new education policy in the Philippines, which really addresses, first of all, it defines what are the skill sets that will be needed, what are the jobs that will be needed. And then I think that a systematic audit needs to be done against, if these are the requirements of tomorrow, this is the training that we are providing today. What is the gap between the two, and how do we bridge that gap?
When people think about AI, they imagine Terminator. Should they fear AI or not?
I think you should fear AI, yes, but not in the way that it was portrayed in the Terminator. I think you should fear AI in terms of the bias, the rogue AI going rogue, or for that matter, if you look at language learning model like ChatGPT, the fact that they are inaccurate, the fact that you cannot rely on the output, the fact that they hallucinate. So one very important question is making sure that the AI models are producing outputs that are unbiased, accurate, truthful and useful. But the other thing is, I think we really need to worry about privacy. We need to worry about because there's a double-edged sword again. The more information I give to an algorithm about me, the more personalized the recommendations can be. But then I am also opening myself up for, potentially huge exposure. So, I mean, one of the sort of visionary ideas that I was talking about was that we will all create personal digital twins potentially of ourselves, which will have all of our information, including our likes, dislikes, our measurements, our preferences, and even our thoughts and feelings and emotions. But now imagine that personal digital twin gets hacked. Wow. Yeah. Now I've not just lost my bank account or my credit card number. This is true identity theft. They will steal me. Mm-hmm. And that's a scary thought. So making sure that we are, being pretty rigorous about identity management and privacy is going to be that's the thing that scares me.
Way back in 2020, when we were all in the middle of lockdown, you were writing about the possible effects of the pandemic on life and the economy. In particular, you were highlighting particular trends that you felt were positive. Among them, hybridization and instrumentation, etc. Now, 3 years later, many of us have already emerged from our hibernation. Has anything surprised you about our new world?
So if you think about what we went through, actually what the entire world went through, and since from March 2020 onwards, it was a period of trauma and traumatic change, but it was also a period of tremendous forced innovation, because we were all organizations, individuals, as learners, as parents, as teachers, as office workers. We had to completely change the way we did things. And we adapted, we learned, organizations learned, right? They learned how to do work from anywhere. We learned how to do hybrid work. Retailers learned how to do digital commerce and curbside pickup and so on and so forth. In education, we learned how to do live streaming, how to do hybrid learning and so on. I think that the pendulum swung from 0 to 100 in terms of digital. Now that we are emerging from our hibernation, as you said, the pendulum is swinging back. And what is surprising me is how much pushback we're getting from people who don't want to go back to the old ways of working. So I think that globally we are arriving at a equilibrium, which is 60-40. Which is like, you come to work 3 days a week and 2 days a week you work remotely. But there's a lot of resistance even to doing that. And one thing that has really surprised me is how people have taken for granted that this flexibility of work will be a birthright, will be a lifetime entitlement. Just a couple of days ago, there was a big article about an insurance company. It's called Farmers Insurance, and their CEO said, "You guys got to come back to the office." And thousands of employees have offered to quit because they said, "Listen, I sold my house and I moved to the suburbs, and my old parents are living with me, and I fired my nanny, and I'm taking care of the kids." And he's like, "You know what? I'm sorry, but." We need you in the office. So that's one thing that actually surprised me. The flip side of it is, what surprised me is that how we are backsliding back into the old ways of doing things, and we've sort of forgotten those innovation lessons. Even in the business school that I teach at, people are like, "Oh, that live streaming, that's over now. I can go back to using chalk and blackboard." No, I'm like, no, we learned so many things during the pandemic. Let us not forget those. Let's retain the best of digital and the best of physical and bring it together to create true, omni-channel experiences, whether it's learning experiences or shopping experiences or, or working experiences for that matter.
So in other words, get the best from both worlds.
And start with the customer, not start with the channel.
Okay, Professor, earlier you compared artificial intelligence to nuclear energy, and you can harness it for good, but it can also be used to blow us all up, as you said. How do we prevent AI from blowing ourselves up?
So to make sure that AI is used in a responsible manner and a productive manner, it's actually a shared responsibility. The responsibility is shared by several entities. First, it will be the creators of the technology, right? And these are the primarily the big tech companies, right? So this is the big seven, and I'll call out names. This is Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Meta, OpenAI, NVIDIA, Intel, IBM. These are the Apple, right? And then in China, you have Baidu and Tencent and Alibaba, right? So these companies all are putting in place already responsible AI policies and things that they will do and will not do. For example, what Google says is that they will never create any AI system that can be used to create military applications, right? Weapons or whatever. or they will never engage in any algorithms, will not talk about any domain related to human rights violations, right? So those are some guardrails these tech companies are putting in. So there are responsible AI policies that all the big tech companies have. That's one domain. The second is the big employers, right? They need to put in responsible AI policies. This is reminiscent to me of when we had social media 10, 15, 20 years ago, and then anybody and any employee could tweet, right? So McDonald's, for instance, put in social media guidelines saying this is, you cannot go online and talk about competition or about pricing or, say something that is racist on our social media channels. So similarly, there will be responsible AI guidelines that companies will need to put in place, right? These are the big employers on how they should. For example, today, like a company like JP Morgan Chase has said, you cannot use ChatGPT at work because we are worried about data privacy. So right now they're sort of locking it down, but ultimately it will be more sort of a responsible use framework. The third set of entities that need to get involved, obviously, is regulators and the government. So they have to put in guardrails that find a balance between kind of allowing the innovation to proceed, but at the same time putting guardrails around it. You can go on either extreme, right? You can have too much regulation and too little regulation. Unfortunately, regulation is rarely done at the right level. It starts with under-regulation, and then suddenly the pendulum swings, and you'll have an over-regulation. And I think over-regulation is coming soon. It's probably going to happen in Europe first. So these are three sets of entities, the big tech companies, the employers, and regulators and government that need to work together to ensure that we don't blow ourselves up. And then, by the way, I would say that as consumers too, there's a responsibility that we have of not doing stupid things, right? So that is sort of, we have a personal responsibility to, for instance, you could have individuals deliberately trying to bias algorithms through a political point of view. We have the 2024 elections coming in the US. I will be very curious to see how AI will be misused by political, interests to skew public opinion one way or the other. So those are sort of personal responsibilities that we. So it's complex. It takes a village to build AI, and it takes a village to build AI responsibly.
Yeah. Well, I'll ask you about the effect of disinformation on all of this. But you mentioned the responsibility of the big companies in the industry. Recently, industry leaders, tech industry leaders got together and signed a joint statement, which I'm sure you're familiar with, that basically says AI poses a risk of extinction. So it sounded very dire and urgent. Are you in that camp? Do you agree that AI?
I'm not in that camp. I think that what they are trying to do is exaggerating to make a point, right? So they are sort of presenting an extreme point of view to shake people out of their apathy. I don't think that even the people who signed the agreement actually believe in all of what is said there. So it is not doom and gloom. I think on balance, this is still a very positive development, but I think it does get people's attention when you make such extreme statements like extinction. So I'm not in that camp, but I do believe that there are legitimate questions that we need to ask, and perhaps it makes sense to shake people and get them to pay attention, because we may be less aware than we need of the downsides. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but you did also say that the way we can protect ourselves from blowing ourselves up is if we put up these guardrails, and that guardrails don't always work, and if they don't work, we could be blown up, right, by our own design.
True, but I think that the scale of the blow up can then you have to contain the blast radius, of the blow. So by the way, just like if you look at weapons, if you look at any other technology, if you look at cybersecurity, there will be bad actors. There will be, violations, and there will be misuse of technology. But to the extent that the larger forces are arrayed on the side of good, take cybersecurity, for instance, or ransomware, right? As long as we all know that there is a threat, and as long as the big tech companies and the government are working to prevent and to deal with these problems, then isolated acts of, I would call it AI terrorism or whatever you want to call it, can be contained, right? But it is when we are actually not paying attention at the policy level, we're not paying attention at the core technology and platform level, that the blow-ups can be pretty spectacular. So think of this, an analogy, business continuity and disaster planning, right? I mean, you plan, and yes, natural disasters will happen, and you live in a country where there is you've been exposed to some really terrific acts of nature, hurricanes and so on. But the question is, what is our disaster recovery plan, and what is our continuity planning? So I'm not saying that blow-ups will not happen. They will happen. The question is, can we prepare ourselves, and do we have the disaster recovery plan in place so that the consequences can be minimized? But I don't believe in the Terminator view of the AI taking over the entire world. I think that is or driving the human race to extinction. That's probably too extreme a point of view.
Well, another danger that experts pointed out, experts like yourself, is that AI could increase disinformation exponentially. Yeah. I mean, we already have a lot of it, but people are saying, AI could just, it could create disinformation on a completely different, much larger scale, and thus endanger democracy, the flow of accurate, truthful information around the world.
This is the challenge of generative AI, because generative AI actually creates new content, right? It creates new text, it creates new images, it creates new videos. So, and it creates something very, very dangerous, and that is deep fakes. So today it is impossible to tell the difference between what is real and what is fake. Whether that is, so imagine that a video surfaces of Joe Biden making homophobic comments, and it's it's a real video that it seems totally real, and that is then spread by the right-wing candidates as evidence that that he's lying or whatever. Now those avatars, those characters mouthing those words can be so realistic that I don't know what's the difference between fake and real. And therefore that misinformation now takes on a whole new level of scariness relative to what was done in the 2016 election by the analytics firm that worked for Donald Trump. That they did in terms of micro-targeting of messages to specific people, but now you will have actually messages created that we will not. So I don't know how we deal with this. I can only think about sort of digital watermarking of human beings, so that if I see your video, it has a watermark saying this is the real so and so. Or sort of I talked about this idea some time back of digital biometrics, right? So there's sort of a biometrics-based authentication of a video or of a speech or audio or a podcast. Because think about it. You run a podcast, right? So in a podcast, I could create a complete fake. In fact, there is a company that does this. Its name is digitalhumans.com, right? This is basically, they make digital humans, and those digital humans can be programmed to be your avatar. And there was a very interesting recent case a couple of months ago of this influencer. She's actually, on OnlyFans. So she has sort of an adult themed OnlyFans site. She has trained an AI algorithm on several thousand hours of her YouTube videos. And now it's basically, I think her name is Carly or something. So you can interact with Carly AI. And she's basically selling time with that avatar for several dollars a minute. In the first week, she made $70,000. She said, I can make $5 million a month because this bot will speak like her, will act like her, will basically, because it is endowed with her personality, her looks, her feelings, her thoughts. And so, where do we stop? So these now, of course, there's a good use of this. I can create my virtual assistant, and my virtual assistant could go out and do my shopping and do my work for me, potentially even attend. So here's an interesting idea. If I have a boring meeting, I can send my avatar, go attend that meeting. Nobody knows that I didn't attend. The avatar comes back, I could simply ask it a question. Give me the executive summary of that meeting. Carol is nodding her head. How many times have you been in meetings where you say, this 1 hour meeting, only 5 minutes of it was relevant or could be summarized. So I think there are some benefits, but it's going to be an interesting world to watch because we'll see both sides of the equation.
Well, you mentioned earlier that AI will inevitably result in displacement of labor, displacement of labor. Any thoughts on how AI will affect journalism? I mean, will we be replaced in the future, or will we have a just more specialized role in this world?
Let me give you an analogy that might be helpful from 100 years ago. So 100 years ago, the gramophone was invented, right? So we created the ability to record music. Now, before that, the only way to experience music was to go to a concert hall and listen to live performance. So now the interesting question that gets asked is, what happened to the earnings and jobs of music performers after the invention of the gramophone? Interestingly, the mean earnings went down, but the variance increased, which means some people made a lot of money and a lot of other people kind of lost out, because now the people whose music was really good could be recorded and scaled, and a lot of people could listen to it, right? That is why, Taylor Swift makes billions of dollars, and because of scalability. So basically what happened there was that the gap between the haves and have-nots increased. I think that's what's going to happen to journalism. I say that news has no value. Point of view has value. Perspective has value. Insight has value. This is what the New York Times says, right? You can get the news from anywhere, but if you want perspective, come to us. If you want analysis. So I think that the journalists who are reporting on facts, who are producing basic blog posts, who are doing kind of very low-level reporting, I think those jobs are not needed anymore. However, AI will become your co-pilot in creating better journalism because it will help you to do the background research. It will help you get ideas. It will help you to create the first draft. I like to say one of my favorite comments about AI, generative AI, is you will never start with a blank page. As a journalist, sometimes staring at a blank page, getting started is the most difficult. But I can always now ask ChatGPT to get me started. So it is a great way to get started. It is a very dangerous tool to use without insight, right? So one of the really interesting things in this context is that you can only ask an algorithm to help you to do a job that you know how to do better than the algorithm does. Because then you know the difference between good recommendations and bad recommendations. So I'll give you an example. I asked ChatGPT recently, what are the reasons why companies can run into problems as they try to become more agile. Give me 5 problems they can run into. It produced 5 problems. Now, I know agile. I know the challenges. I have personal experience with them. One out of those 5 things is like something I hadn't thought about. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. 2 out of the 5 I agreed with, and I said, that's really well done. The other 2, I said, these are actually either not that great arguments or they're actually wrong. So I was able to now write my article very quickly, leveraging on the 2 that it did well, the one that I hadn't thought about, but then adding my own inputs to the to create an article. And I got this process done in 1/5 the time that I would have it had started with a blank page. That's the idea. That's how journalists should work. AI as a co-pilot.
I'm curious, Professor. You teach and you evaluate and grade students. How can you tell if a student based his work on just asking ChatGPT to write?
Yes, there is actually now
his or her paper. Do you have a tool already to figure that out?
Yeah, there's a tool that Stanford created called Detect GPT, and Detect GPT, actually finds out if it was done. But what I'm doing actually is I'm co-opting ChatGPT. So I just actually, the timing is excellent when you're asking me this question, because I just wrote my final exam, and I just gave, my students are taking the final exam as we speak. So in my final exam, I said, so let's say that the problem that I'm looking at is that how would I come up with a marketing plan for a eco-friendly cleaning product? Okay. I asked ChatGPT. Then what I told my students is, this is the result that ChatGPT gave. How would you improve upon this? What are the things you don't like about it? How would you ask this question better? So I'm actually co-opting. I'm assuming they're going to cheat. And now I'm going to say, I'm teaching them how to take the input that AI provides, output that it provides, with a grain of salt, adding their own judgment to it. So one of the tactics we are adopting as teachers is to use it to help students evaluate the output of these models, as opposed to saying it is banned, don't use it, right? Because this is the new slide rule. This is the new calculator, scientific calculator. I'm not going to fight it. What I'm going to say is use it, but go beyond it. That's the way I'm dealing with it.
Millions in the Philippines are employed by business processing centers, and millions as well in India. And are those jobs in danger?
Those jobs will evolve. Those jobs will change, and you will need fewer people, but they'll be doing more meaningful work. So, for example, if I am take an example that I am in a call center and I'm responding to customer complaints, right? Let's say it's an airline. So if the customer calls in and says, I've got this particular problem with my missing baggage or my trip, then the AI will produce recommendations that will help me to resolve that call faster and with greater customer satisfaction. So it will take away or for instance, if I'm calling and saying, my television isn't working and my error code is 4036, the AI will say, this error code corresponds to this problem, and therefore what you should tell the customer is, this is the fix, right? So it will reduce the time taken to serve customers. It will increase customer satisfaction. Most importantly, it will increase job satisfaction for the people. But you will need fewer people at lower levels. So that's the double-edged sword.
Okay, we're all looking forward to your visit to the Philippines. We want to thank Dr.
Looking forward to it. I enjoyed this conversation, and thanks for setting it up.
Thank you, Dr. Mohan Sawhney, for your time and for sharing your expertise and insights with our audience.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Howie Severino. Check out the Howie Severino Podcast, an original for GMA News and Public Affairs. New episodes will stream every Thursday. Listen for free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and other platforms.